in better shape than James Harden.
Looks it anyway.
I'm probably more competitive. I would have gotten up more than one shot and a half.
I'll tell you what. So this is what I think James Harden's thinking, Coach. I want to bounce it off you. I think Harden's going to opt in, right? He's going to take the $47 million because there's not going to be a thriving market for him right now. And let's just table the relationship with Daryl Morey and with ownership that he has, so he may believe he's got $200 million coming in a supermax extension. Let's just, because it'll be a good test of how rational Daryl Morey really is. And okay, so let's just put that aside for a second. I think what James Harden's thinking is, I'll opt in, and then I'll get in shape. I'll be fine. I'll stop going out, so I'll get in bed. But like a lot of people, I'll start the diet tomorrow or whatever, or whatever it is in your life you're going to do. That my dad has an expression: procrastinate later, right? Like if you're going to put something off, put off. I think he's fooling himself if that's what he's thinking, Coach. And I have a sense that's what he's thinking.
I don't know what he's thinking. I just know that it was an embarrassment yesterday. James Harden's a good player. He's not that guy. And that's just the way it is. He's not that guy, and he's not that guy in the playoffs, and he hasn't been that guy in the playoffs. I think he's a good player, but there's a difference between being a good player and a winning player in a game that means something, in a series that means something. And, look, nothing against James Harden. I'm sure he's a great dude. I'm just looking at it just as it is. That was an embarrassment yesterday. And the Sixers, the construction of the Sixers, and you can talk about their roster. I do not like their roster. No one talks, Jay Will.
So I agree with you. I said before yesterday, 2 days ago, that I thought they were leaderless. And I think it's really hard for a big, even though he's as great as Joel Embiid, to be the leader, because the leader has to have the ball in his hands predominantly most of the game. And that's James Harden to me. So that's one thing. But do you think they gave up too much for James Harden?
Well, they got James Harden on a deal, basically. So, look, Ben Simmons, you couldn't count on Ben Simmons. That's just the way it is. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, and this is before Daryl Morey, but you can't lose Jimmy Butlers of the world. You just can't lose Jimmy Butlers, because you can't lose a guy that's fiercely competitive on every single play and expect to win. Like, you put Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid, you got two guys that are fiercely competitive, are going to compete, and they hold a standard to everyone else in the locker room. Like, who coaches the locker room for the Sixers? Like, who coaches the – you're only as good as your locker room. Like, who coaches the locker room? I don't know if they gave up too much. I look at the makeup of this team. The one person that plays besides Joel Embiid, who's competitive, and he was banged up, his wrist, obviously all the injuries, is Tyrese Maxey. Name me another person that really plays with an energy and a joy. I mean, it was embarrassing. You're playing in an elimination game. Like, I know how competitive you are. If you're playing an elimination game, you're playing an elimination game, you're going down swinging.
Fighting.
All right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There was no fight, and everyone wants to put it on Doc. You can only play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah.
And that hand that he was dealt is not a winning, competitive, hard-playing hand. You have a guy that's 32 years old with a 38-year-old body that is not a tough, competitive, winning player. You've got a young, talented guard in Tyrese Maxey. You have no bench. You've got to beat up Embiid. Tobias Harris is a nice piece, but he's not a guy that you can count on in terms of, being that guy. He's a nice piece playing off guys. That's not a very good roster. Mm-hmm. It really isn't. I mean, like, Doc can't – there's only so much you can do. And I heard his post-game interview. And, like, I know people want to take shots at him. It's easy to take shots at him. Like, do you think he's going to be here? Well, if he's not going to be in Philly, he's going to be somewhere next year coaching because he knows what he's doing. But that roster, and I don't know Daryl Morey, and he might be the greatest GM in the world. I don't see it. I think he does a great job with the media. He lets everyone know how hard he's working. He does all those things. I mean, I don't see it, and I can't imagine them signing Harden to a long-term deal.
You know what, Coach? Yeah, you talk about, and the guys up there sitting with you right now, looking at the deal and saying sort of the same thing, but I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I'm looking at it from a Joel Embiid perspective, right? Time is running out on a guy. You mentioned many things. You mentioned Doc Rivers and the roster they constructed, which isn't good for what Doc wants to do. You mentioned Harden being old. But I look at it in today's NBA, as you follow it, Jay follows it, Max follows, these guys get together. And we saw with Jimmy Butler how much praise he had for Joel Embiid, how much he talked about him. When will Joel Embiid when is the time going to run out and that frustration going to kick in where he finally says, like a lot of players in the NBA with contracts make decisions that they don't want to be there any longer? When is that going to happen, you think, Coach, if at all?
That's interesting. The process. He is the process. He's the lone holdover of the process. That whole concept of the process is almost comical now. I don't know. That's the question. I don't know Joel Embiid in terms of his DNA. Would he, ask for a trade? I think he's bought into Philadelphia. But eventually he wants to win at the highest level, and he wants to win a championship.
And yeah, absolutely. But if you're watching
Would you
everybody
trade
else,
Anthony
your peers,
Davis for Embiid?
think about it. If you
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus right now.